Every year on Halloween night, the box hums. No one knows who built it. No one knows where it came from. But every October, around midnight, something inside starts moving. Not scratching, not clawing. Moving like someone pacing in a room too small for them. People say it only opens when the air is thin, when the world forgets which side of the dark it's on. This year, it didn't wait. It opened early. The strings, the masks, the shadows, they all came crawling out. And tonight, they're telling their stories. Welcome to Halfway Dark. Welcome to the night they all came out of the box. The house that decorated itself. The first pumpkin showed up sometime after midnight. At least, that's what the Harkers told everyone the next morning when they found it sitting on their porch, carved, lit, and still warm inside, like someone had just finished cutting it. They laughed it off, said maybe a neighbor kid was doing early decorations. But by the next night, there were 3 pumpkins. The night after that, 12, each with different faces, some grinning, some drooling, one crying wax tears that hadn't been there the night before. By the end of the week, the Harkers' yard looked like something out of a Halloween store catalog. Only no one saw them putting anything up. Every morning, the display grew. A fog machine, tombstones with moving shadows, a life-size witch whose eyes followed you as you walked by. Even their doorbell changed. It started playing a distorted laugh instead of a chime. When my wife asked Mrs. Harker where they got all the stuff, she said, "It just shows up." We thought she was joking, until the night we saw it happen. It was around 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, so I went to get a drink and saw something moving through the blinds, slow, jerky motion, like someone carrying a heavy box. But it wasn't a person. It was the scarecrow, the 12-foot one they'd propped in the yard. It walked right across their lawn, dragging a plastic coffin behind it. The thing was bent over, its straw-stuffed head twitching with every step, like it was being pulled on invisible strings. The next morning, the coffin was open on the porch, and the scarecrow was standing at the door, head tilted toward the house. When the Harkers came outside, they looked exhausted. Mrs. Harker's eyes were red. She said they could hear something moving inside the walls at night. The decorations kept shifting closer to the house, like they were trying to get in. They called the police twice. Both times, the officers laughed it off. One even took a selfie with the scarecrow. 3 nights later, the Harkers' lights stayed off. Their car was still in the driveway. Their curtains were drawn tight. And every single decoration, all 40 or 50 of them, were standing perfectly still, facing the house. Then, around 3 a.m., the fog machine kicked on by itself. A white cloud rolled across the lawn, and in it, the shapes started to move. Not flicker, move. The scarecrow turned its head. The witch's hand twitched. The tombstones cracked open, spilling soil that hadn't been there before. I ran to the window. Through the haze, I saw the Harkers' front door slowly swing open. A figure, or maybe 2, walked out. They were dressed in costumes made of torn garbage bags and bits of pumpkin skin. Faces that looked carved, hollow. They didn't say anything. They just crossed the lawn, dragging something heavy between them. It looked like a sack, or maybe a person. The fog swallowed them halfway across the street. When it cleared, the yard was empty. The next morning, there were new decorations. 2 human-sized figures on the porch. The faces were detailed, too detailed. One had Mrs. Harker's red hair. The other wore Mr. Harker's old jacket. No one answered the door. Police came again, but they didn't go inside. They said it looked like a Halloween prank gone too far. They put up tape, told everyone to stay clear. That night, the tape was gone. But the decorations were back, multiplied. Every yard on the block had something new. Skeletons on swings, bats on wires, fog spilling from mailboxes. Even if you tore them down, they'd reappear the next day, right where you found them. I stopped sleeping by the window. But last night, I heard something knock against the glass. When I looked up, there was a pumpkin sitting on the sill. Not carved, but breathing, the faintest rise and fall under the skin. I went outside this morning, and my porch was covered in fake cobwebs and flickering candles I didn't buy. And standing by the door was a scarecrow. Not theirs, mine. It's wearing my jacket, and it's looking at the window where I sleep. If you walk past the Harker's house now, you'll notice something strange. Every decoration faces the same direction, toward mine. Halloween's close. I think whatever's inside that box they opened is still spreading. It decorates the world one house at a time. If you ever wake up and find something new on your porch, don't touch it. Don't move it. And for God's sake, don't decorate back. The box remembers every house that joins in. And once it chooses yours, it never closes again. The masks left on every doorstep. They showed up on the morning of October 30th. Every house on my street had one neatly placed on the doorstep, like an early trick-or-treat delivery. At first, we thought it was some local prank. The masks were all different handmade, detailed, unsettling. Mine had smooth porcelain skin and a grin too wide for any real face. Across the street, Mrs. Langley's mask had painted tears that looked wet even in the dry fall air. By noon, people started posting about them on the neighborhood Facebook page. Some laughed it off, others were creeped out. But then someone noticed the pattern. Each mask looked like the person who lived there. Not exactly, but close enough. Close enough to make you feel like something had been watching you long enough to get the details almost right. That night, I couldn't stop looking at mine. I put it in the garage, covered it with an old towel. But every time I passed by, I swore the towel had shifted a little. When I finally went to bed, I dreamed I was standing on my own porch, looking down at a mask that blinked up at me. I woke up at 3:11 a.m. to the sound of my doorbell. It rang once, then again, then nothing. I didn't look through the peephole. Something about the silence that followed felt wrong, like whoever was there was waiting for me to make the first move. When I finally checked the porch the next morning, there were two masks sitting side by side. Both mine, identical. I called the police. They came, took photos, didn't care. They told me it was Halloween season. Kids playing pranks. They didn't even take the masks, so I locked them in the shed out back. That afternoon, I noticed more posts online. People were finding duplicates too. Some had 3. Some had 4. No one ever saw who left them. No cameras caught anything. But everyone agreed on one thing: each new mask was more accurate than the last. On October 31st, my phone buzzed at 5:47 p.m. It was a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Me standing at my own front door, holding one of the masks. Only I was inside my house when I got it. By the time the sun went down, my neighborhood had gone quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from everyone leaving for parties or trick-or-treating. It was the kind that settles in after something moves through a place and takes the noise with it. I checked the shed again. It was empty. Every single mask was gone. The shelves were bare, dust disturbed, as if a small wind had passed through. I shut the door, locked it, and turned back toward the house. There was someone standing on my porch. For half a second, I thought it was my reflection in the window, but then I saw it tilt its head in the opposite direction of mine. It was wearing my mask. It didn't move when I shouted, didn't react when I told it to leave. It just stood there, breathing slow and steady through a slit that shouldn't have allowed air through porcelain. Then it reached up with one hand and pulled at its own face. The mask came off, but what was underneath looked exactly the same. It walked to the edge of my porch, stopped, and pointed at the house across the street. Someone was standing there too, then another, and another. Every house had one now. Every mask had found its match. I ran inside, locked everything I could. The doorbell rang 3 times, evenly spaced. When I didn't answer, they started knocking, then scratching, then whispering through the vents, under the floorboards, behind the walls. "Let us in," they said. "We're already you." I hid in my bedroom until the noises stopped, until the world went still again. And for a while, I thought maybe it was over, until I looked out the window. They weren't on the porches anymore. The street was empty. I waited, hours, then morning came. I opened the front door just enough to check. The masks were all gone again, except for one. It sat on my welcome mat, cracked down the middle, the paint smeared like something had clawed at it from the inside. A note was folded beneath it. It wasn't written by hand. It was printed in perfect font, in perfect alignment, like something that didn't understand handwriting tried to mimic it anyway. The note said, "Thank you for your face. Yours fits best." That night, I noticed the bathroom mirror fogging up even though I hadn't showered. In the mist, faint lines started to appear. Not words, just shapes. A grin, too wide for a real face. The lights came on after midnight. The lights came on at exactly 12:03 a.m., sudden and bright, filling every corner of my house. Even the bulbs I had unplugged weeks ago glowed as if they had a pulse of their own, and the shadows began to stretch unnaturally across the walls. I stepped onto the porch, squinting into the street. Every house was glowing, every window illuminated except the old Miller house. It remained dark, silent, like a black hole had swallowed the light. The air felt thick and heavy, pressing down against my chest, making each breath an effort. Across the street, movement flickered behind the Johnsons' curtains. A figure swayed just slightly, almost imperceptibly, like it was alive but not human. Mrs. Rayner's empty kitchen window also held a shifting silhouette, though she had moved out weeks ago. 5 houses, at least, contained similar, still shapes facing their windows. Panic gripped me as I ran inside, locking every door and flipping every switch. Nothing changed. The lights inside the house glowed brighter than before, humming and vibrating as if testing the walls for weaknesses. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number had sent a photo. It showed my living room and someone standing behind me. The figure in the photo was thin, unnaturally elongated, limbs bending slightly wrong. I spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. Every light flickered, dimmed, surged again. The hallway mirror reflected my empty self, but the reflection moved just before I did, mimicking me with a delay that made my skin crawl. The lights cut abruptly, leaving the house in total darkness. I could hear footsteps upstairs, uneven, dragging across the floor. My bedroom door's knob clicked softly. I gripped the lamp like a weapon. The bedroom light went out, leaving nothing but black and the sound of my own breathing pounding in my ears. 30 seconds passed, then another 30. I dared to open the bedroom door. The hallway was empty, but the mirror glowed faintly. In the reflection, my own house was visible from outside, and a figure stood on the porch, perfectly still, light leaking unnaturally from under its skin. Suddenly, every window in the house flashed white. The mirror cracked, fine lines spider webbing across its surface. Knocking started soft at first, then rhythmic, faster, synchronized, as if every window had joined in. Outside, dozens of glowing silhouettes appeared on the street, all facing my house, moving in jerky, puppet-like motions as though controlled by strings. I bolted to the basement, ignoring the groans of the stairs beneath me. The hum of the furnace filled my ears, echoing each panicked breath. When the lights surged back on, every bulb in the basement glared white. Across the wall, letters formed in ash. We turned them on. At 3 a.m., the lights died again. Complete darkness. The sound of breathing surrounded me, slow, mechanical, not human. I closed my eyes, counted to 10, and opened them, unsure if I had truly been alone. The house felt alive, and I felt like an intruder in my own home. Morning came. My neighbor texted me, "Did you get your power fixed last night?" I hadn't left the basement. Every light in the neighborhood had seemed normal again, and no one admitted to seeing anything strange. But I knew. I had seen too much. Now, every night, I unplug everything and wait. I sit in the dark until morning. Sometimes, though, the lights come back on by themselves, just for a second. Something always appears in the corner of the room, standing, watching, smiling, glowing in the unnatural white light. I've stopped trying to fight it. Some things I've realized don't care if you see them. The street, the houses, the figures, they exist on a schedule. They wait, and when the lights come on after midnight, I know they are watching again. Halfway dark. The lights came on after midnight. If the lights come on, don't move, don't breathe. Just watch, and maybe subscribe to keep the horror box open. The person wearing my Halloween costume. I left my costume by the door, just for a moment, planning to come back after grabbing my phone. It wasn't special, just a simple mask and cloak, but someone or something was waiting. By the time I turned around, the costume was gone. At first, I thought a prank. My roommate, maybe, testing me for a laugh. But the apartment was empty. No lights flicked. No doors moved. Just silence, the kind that presses against your ears, making every shadow feel like it's leaning toward you. I went to the street. The neighborhood kids were already dressed up, running house to house. My costume didn't appear anywhere, but as I passed the corner, I glimpsed it floating in the distance, worn by a figure moving too fluidly to be human. Its mask caught the moonlight, turning eyes black as coal. The cloak shifted like smoke, drifting unnaturally with every step. It moved like me. Not just the costume, but the posture, the way I slouched, the slight tilt of my head. Every motion mirrored me perfectly. I froze, my heart pounded. A child ran past, but the figure didn't react. It stayed on the sidewalk, watching. I blinked, and it vanished. Not behind a tree, not down the street. Gone, like it had never been there. Back in the apartment, I noticed subtle changes. Drawers slightly open, my shoes moved out of place. The lamp I left on the counter now on the floor. The costume was back inside, folded neatly. But the mask? The mask had moved to my bedroom chair. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound floor creaks, pipes groaning, wind rattling the window made me jump. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined a shadow draped in the cloak, standing at the foot of the bed, mask tilted like it was studying me. Around midnight, the door creaked, slowly. A soft step in the living room. I waited, heart hammering, listening. The costume rustled, as if someone had just adjusted it. I didn't move. My breath caught, counting every second. A whisper came from the hall. My voice, but not mine. Soft, eerie, repeating a phrase I didn't recognize until I realized it was my own, mimicking the way I sound when I speak quietly to myself. I ran to the bathroom, flicked the light switch on and off. Nothing happened. Then in the mirror, I saw it. Not me, not my reflection, but someone wearing my exact Halloween costume just inside the room. Standing still, perfectly still, watching me. I tried to speak. No words came. My mouth wouldn't move right. Panic gripped me. I backed away, tripping over my own shoes, and the figure moved slowly, deliberately, following each step. Every movement mirrored me perfectly, just a fraction behind, as if copying my fears. The window shook slightly, like a breath against the glass. Outside, I saw more shapes, figures, and costumes, moving silently down the street. Some wore masks like mine. Others, like neighbors I hadn't seen in years. all glancing toward the apartment. By 2 a.m., I had barricaded every door, every window, every closet. I hid in the bedroom, lights off, trembling. Yet I could hear the soft, scraping steps of the costume moving on its own. Closet doors opening, drawers sliding, whispers imitating my own voice with terrifying accuracy. I grabbed the flashlight, shone it toward the corner. Nothing but the mask I had left on the chair caught the light. And then it blinked. Slow, deliberate, a mechanical movement no human should make. I screamed, and the lights in the hallway flickered. The costume appeared suddenly in the hall, not moving like a person, more like an extension of the shadows. Every movement mirrored mine, as if it was learning, memorizing, preparing. I backed into the bedroom, slammed the door. Heavy knocks followed. Tap, tap, faster. Then, silence. Morning came. The costume was folded neatly at the foot of the bed, the mask placed atop it. No signs of anyone entering. No evidence at all, except the lingering feeling of being watched, studied, and copied in every subtle way. I left my apartment that day, costume in hand. Never put it down. Every reflection I passed in the street, every shadow felt alive, watching. And I realized they weren't just copying me. They were preparing. Waiting for the night, I forgot myself entirely. Now, every Halloween, I check my reflection before bed. Every costume I own, I keep close. I never leave a mask unattended. And sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps that match my own perfectly, echoing just behind me, even when I'm alone. Halfway dark, the person wearing my Halloween costume. If you ever see someone wearing your face, your mask, or your clothes, don't approach. Watch, and maybe subscribe to keep the horror box open. The house that breathed at midnight. It started with a sigh, a low, wet exhale from the walls of my new apartment, just after midnight. I thought it was the pipes settling, the house adjusting, until it came again, louder, deeper, like something alive moving behind the plaster. The first night, I ignored it. A long day of unpacking and work left me too tired to care. But as the clock ticked past 1 a.m., the walls sighed in response to my breathing. The sound wasn't random. It matched me. By the third night, the exhale had grown intentional. It swelled when I moved, shrank when I stopped. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to hear a source, but it was all around me. Behind the drywall, beneath the floorboards, inside the ceiling itself. I began to notice movement in the corners of my apartment. Shadows bending where shadows shouldn't be. Flickers in mirrors that weren't caused by light. One evening, the kitchen cupboards rattled in time with my own heartbeat, like they were learning it. I tried to leave. The hallway stretched longer than it should, the exit door just out of reach. The walls pulsed softly, as if inhaling, then exhaling to push me back inside. Panic clawed at me. This wasn't just a house. It was watching, aware, waiting. Footsteps echoed in rooms I hadn't entered, not mine. They didn't follow human rhythm. Each step stretched, slow, deliberate, like a predator practicing its approach. When I turned, the hallway looked empty, but something pressed against the wall a shadow, not entirely shadow, with edges that moved against the light. I tried calling friends. No signal. Phones wouldn't charge. Even the Wi-Fi struggled, flickering like the house was choking the connection. Outside, cars drove by, oblivious, but no one stopped. No one noticed the walls breathing. Then came the whispers. Soft at first, like wind, then sharper, like words forming just beneath comprehension. I couldn't understand them, but the tone was clear. You're ours now. Every syllable made my chest tighten, and I realized the sound synchronized with my own breathing, speeding when I panicked, slowing when I froze. I left the lights on. Lamps, ceiling bulbs, nightlights, nothing mattered. The house exhaled brighter than them all, pulsing through the cracks. I could see the floorboards lift slightly with each breath, warping like skin over bones. I pressed my hand against the floor, feeling it move beneath me. It started leaving traces. Objects moved. A chair I left in the hallway would appear in the bedroom. Books shifted positions. Even my clothing folded itself neatly, as though the house wanted order, wanted me to see that it could control more than just the air around me. On the fourth night, I stayed in the center of the apartment, daring it to come closer. The breathing slowed, then a window rattled. The exhale grew into a full gust, cold and wet, pushing me to my knees. The walls seemed to lean in, corners stretching, as if the house itself was preparing to swallow me. Then the floor groaned louder under something heavy. I tried to leave again, but the door felt wrong. Not locked, just unreachable. The hallway extended. The door handle stretched far out of reach. I stumbled, falling against the wall, and felt it pulse against my back. I realized I couldn't hide. Every place I tried to cower, the bathroom, bedroom, closets, the house followed, breathing, pushing, watching. And I understood. It wasn't just a building. It was something that had learned, that mirrored me, that knew the exact moment I felt afraid. By the fifth night, the whispers were constant. Every sound inside my head was answered by a movement in the house. Every breath I took matched a sigh, every heartbeat a vibration in the walls. I had no distinction between me and it. The climax came suddenly. At 12:01 a.m., the entire apartment exhaled at once. A wave of air knocked me off my feet. Furniture lifted slightly, then fell. The lights pulsed violently, and from the corner of the living room, a shape emerged, not quite shadow, not quite solid, perfectly mimicking my own posture. I froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't. The figure took a step, perfectly in sync with me. Another. It didn't speak, but I felt words pressed directly into my mind. You belong here now. Morning arrived, and the apartment was normal again. The breathing gone, the whispers silenced, but nothing had moved back to its original place. The chair remained in the bedroom. The books were stacked differently. My clothing on the bed had been arranged into a small, neat pile. I left for work that day, every step feeling lighter than it should. But when I returned, the house greeted me like an old friend. The walls shifted slightly as I entered. The floor pulsed gently beneath my feet, exhaling softly, as if the building itself was breathing a welcome. Now, every night, I sleep with lights on, doors open, air conditioner running. I can feel the pulsing beneath the floorboards. The whispers return occasionally, low and patient. And sometimes, just before dawn, I see a shadow at the edge of the living room, mimicking my movements perfectly. I can't leave. The lease says I can, but the house disagrees. It's patient. It waits for me to understand that I'm no longer the visitor. I'm part of it. And sometimes, when I take a deep breath, I realize it breathes because I do. Halfway dark. The house that breathed at midnight. If your walls ever start breathing, don't fight, don't run, and maybe subscribe to keep the horror box open. The house that gave candy with conditions. It wasn't supposed to be a special house. Just one more old creaking Victorian on the quiet end of my street. But every year, something about it drew kids in. This Halloween, I finally found myself standing at the chipped wooden steps, candy bag in hand, heart thudding. The door opened before I could knock. No one stood there, just a dim, flickering light from inside. A tray appeared, balanced in the air as if held by invisible hands, offering candy in perfectly wrapped packets. I hesitated, but the smell, sickly sweet, faintly metallic, was impossible to resist. I took one. The second I did, a soft whisper brushed my ear. Take only one. I turned. Nothing. The house was empty. Just a faint smell of burnt sugar and dust. The door shut slowly behind me, and for a moment, I thought I was locked out. But then it opened again, offering more. Curiosity overrode caution. I took another. The wrapper felt strangely warm in my hands, as if it pulsed like a heartbeat. I unwrapped it. The candy tasted wrong sweet, yes, but sour underneath and sharp, almost bitter at the edges. A shiver ran down my spine. When I turned to leave, I noticed the street was different. Houses I knew were missing, replaced by dark, featureless shapes. The sky was dim, a faint orange haze swirling above. And the house, it had grown. Taller, wider, windows stretching impossibly upward. Another whisper. Share it or you stay. My eyes darted around. Nothing but shadows. I realized the candy bag had changed. The candy multiplied. Small, irregularly shaped pieces, each glowing faintly. I dropped some on the ground. They crawled back toward the bag. Fear rose like a tide. I tried running. The sidewalk stretched, warped, as if the world itself had bent to keep me near the house. The windows shifted. Faces appeared in them, thin, pale, eyes too large, smiles too wide. They watched, unblinking, judging. I tossed the candy behind me. The pieces moved. Soft, wet slapping sounds as they rolled back into the bag. The whispers were louder now, overlapping like dozens of voices speaking at once. Take more. Share it. Stay. Panic clawed at my throat. A child appeared suddenly on the steps of the house. Pale, small, wearing a tattered costume. The bag of candy floated in front of them, open, glowing faintly. The child tilted its head, mouth opening unnaturally wide. You don't want to be alone, do you? I ran. The street twisted under my feet. Windows blinked open and shut behind me, always revealing faces watching me, always grinning. The whispers followed, shaping words I couldn't stop hearing. You accepted it. You belong. Give it to someone else. I ducked behind a tree. The candy bag floated past, gliding silently, edges glowing faintly, each piece shimmering with a soft heartbeat. The child followed. Not running, just gliding, perfectly aligned, mirrored, waiting for me to move. I tried to throw the candy. It returned. Every attempt failed. The bag pulsed as though alive. Shadows stretched across the street, forming fingers, reaching for me. I realized then the house had given me more than candy. It had given me rules. Back home, I hid the bag, but every night it moves. At first slowly, then faster, crawling across the floor. The wrappers whisper. Sometimes I hear a tiny voice, the child from the house, calling me by name. Share it or stay. Neighbors avoid my house now. They don't understand. They think Halloween is fun, candy and costumes, laughter. They don't know the house can watch, can give, can demand obedience. And every Halloween, the lights flicker and the door creaks, inviting another soul. Last night, I saw a shadow pass my window, wearing the same tattered costume as the child. The bag floated behind it, pulsing faintly, glowing just enough to cast long shadows against the walls. And I heard the whispers again, louder than ever. It's your turn to give. I haven't touched the candy since. I haven't left the house. But every night, I feel it moving, shifting, waiting. The house gave me a gift, but gifts aren't free. They are rules, conditions, and Halloween is the deadline. Some nights, when I close my eyes, I see the child standing at the edge of my bed, mouth opening impossibly wide, eyes too large, and I remember the rule. Share it or stay. I don't want to share it, but I also don't want to stay. Halfway dark. The house that gave candy, with conditions. If you ever receive candy from a house that watches, don't unwrap it. don't take it inside, and maybe subscribe to keep the horror box open. The trick-or-treaters were never there. It started when the first knocks came. A soft, rhythmic tap on my door just after dusk. I opened it. Nothing. The street was empty, houses dark, no children, no costumes. Just the faint smell of autumn leaves and something metallic in the air. I shrugged it off and closed the door, but the knocking returned, faster this time, in a syncopated rhythm, like someone tapping a code. I peeked through the peephole. The street was still empty. No shadows, no movement. Yet the knocks continued, soft and deliberate, echoing through the wooden door. Curiosity mixed with dread. I cracked the door. Silence. Then I noticed something on the porch. A small pile of candy, neatly stacked, untouched by dirt or leaves. The wrappers glimmered slightly in the fading light. I didn't remember leaving any there. I stepped outside. No one in sight. The candy was ordinary, familiar, generic. I picked it up. The moment my fingers brushed the top piece, a whisper floated across the yard, soft, almost drowned out by the wind. Take one, or we wait. I froze. The voice wasn't human. It wasn't even clear, but it carried intent, expectation. I grabbed a single candy and hurried back inside. The moment I shut the door, the knocking ceased. Silence settled over the house, thick and unnatural, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floor, every sigh of the wind outside felt amplified, like the house was listening. I imagined tiny hands at the window, faces pressed against the glass, and each imagined shadow seemed too real, too deliberate. At midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you, but not everyone is happy. I stared at the screen. Outside, faint giggling. Too high-pitched, too synchronized. It wasn't children playing. The next evening, the knocking returned, louder, more insistent. I ignored it. But then something else appeared on the porch. Tiny footprints pressed into the damp leaves. Bare, human, impossibly small, leading to the candy pile. No one in sight, no movement. Just the prints. I picked up a piece, examined it. The wrapper was cold, almost icy. I unwrapped it. Inside, the candy had a strange sheen, like liquid glass. My reflection shimmered faintly on its surface, twisted, and I heard a faint giggle, right behind my ear, though the room was empty. Over the next nights, the pattern continued. Knocks, candy, whispers, tiny footprints. I never saw the trick-or-treaters, yet I felt them everywhere. In corners, behind curtains, under the bed. Their presence was impossible to ignore. Always patient, always observing, waiting for the next choice. I tried leaving the house, walking the streets to avoid the porch, to escape the rhythm. The knocks followed. Each house I passed had the same tiny footprints, the same whispers. The candy appeared in my bag, unbidden, glowing faintly under the moonlight. One night, I left the porch empty. No candy, no footprints. Silence, relief, until I returned inside. The living room had changed. The furniture shifted, slightly rotated. The TV flickered on by itself, showing static shapes moving like small, distorted children. The whispers echoed from the screen. We waited. Now you play. I ran to the front door. Locked, impossible to open. I felt them behind me, shadows stretching, faces impossibly close. I turned, no one there, but the air pressed against me, heavy, cold, suffocating. My reflection in the hallway mirror twitched, smiling faintly when I didn't. The climax came when I saw them. Not fully visible, just edges of shapes glimpsed through the corner of my eye. Tiny hands pressed against the walls, bodies crouched, moving unnaturally fast. They circled the house, whispers overlapping, rhythmic, hypnotic. Share it. or we wait. I realized then it didn't matter if I opened the door. They were already inside. The porch, the street, even the candy, they were extensions of them. They existed in the expectation, in the anticipation, in my fear. And I had become part of their game. Morning came, but the feeling never left. Shadows lingered, faint but deliberate. Footsteps echoed where none should be. And every night, the knocking resumes, the candy appears. Tiny footprints leading to nothing. They never tire, never stop, and they always remember who answered the door. I haven't slept properly since. I keep my porch light off, my windows curtained. But every knock reminds me, they are patient. They are watching. And one day, they will decide I've waited long enough. Halfway dark. The trick-or-treaters who are never there. If the knocks come after dark, don't answer. Don't look. And maybe, subscribe to keep the horror box open. The neighbor who wore my face. It started with a glance across the street. A man standing in the shadows, motionless. At first, I thought it was just someone watching the Halloween decorations, waiting for a prank. But something was off. The posture, the tilt of the head, it was identical to mine. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a trick of light, a reflection, something my tired brain imagined. But every time I turned, he was there, perfectly still, perfectly mimicking my gestures, the way I scratch my ear, adjust my jacket. It was impossible. I tried to ignore him. Went inside, locked the door, convinced myself it was nothing. But then I saw it through the kitchen window, a face pressed to the glass, identical to mine. Not similar, not a doppelganger in concept. My face, my expression, every detail perfectly replicated. I backed away. My phone slipped from my hand, and the man or whatever he was vanished. For a second, relief. But then I noticed movement behind my neighbor's curtained window. Shadows stretching, edges of shapes shifting, imitating every move I made inside my own apartment. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him at the window, in the shadows, at the edge of my vision. I tried drawing the blinds. Too late. The reflection in the glass showed him already inside, copying me, breathing in rhythm with my own chest. By morning, I noticed subtle changes. Furniture slightly shifted. My clothes on the chair were arranged differently. A cup I had left on the counter now sat inverted, a perfect mirror image of how I would place it if someone studied me. That night, I dared to confront him. I went outside, flashlight trembling. The street was empty. Leaves rustled in the wind. And then I saw movement, my reflection on the neighbor's window, stepping forward, staring back at me. My heart froze. I called the police, described everything. By the time they arrived, the street was normal. No shadows, no face, no sign of intrusion. They left, shaking their heads. I stayed inside, convinced it was over. But every reflective surface in my apartment felt wrong, as though someone else had stepped inside my world. By Halloween night, the mimicry escalated. Mirrors shimmered, the reflection not perfectly aligned, yet moving slightly behind me, anticipating every motion. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Happy Halloween. You're almost ready. I didn't respond. I hid in the bedroom. The whispers started, low, synchronized with my breathing, repeating my thoughts before I even thought them. You are mine. We are alike. The reflection in the darkened window blinked at me when I didn't. I left my apartment briefly, thinking daylight would break the illusion. Walking the street, I noticed every reflection, from cars to shop windows, was slightly off. Not mirrored, not mine, not anyone else's, just wrong. And always moving slightly out of sync with me. Returning home, the front door rattled. The handle turned slightly. I didn't lock it that morning. I hadn't touched it. Inside, a note, typed perfectly. You wear my face tonight. I barricaded the door, every reflective surface covered with sheets. Yet I could hear subtle movements, soft, deliberate, just beyond the walls. Footsteps perfectly aligned with mine. When I looked under the blankets at the mirror, I saw the edge of a face, not my own, pressing through the sheet. I realized then, it wasn't just copying me. It was studying me, preparing to replace me, to walk through my life unnoticed, waiting for the perfect moment to step fully into my world. I haven't slept properly since. Every night, reflections flicker. Every shadow stretches too long. Every breeze feels like something brushing my skin. And sometimes, when I glimpse the neighbor's window across the street, I see him, or it's smiling with my own face. I know it's patient. It doesn't rush. It waits. And every movement I make, every breath I take, every reflection I glance into, it copies, silently, perfectly, until Halloween is over. Or until it decides I've been replaced. Halfway dark, the neighbor who wore my face. If someone seems to copy your movements too perfectly, don't confront them. Don't open the door. And maybe subscribe to keep the horror box open. The Harvest Dolls. It started the week before Halloween. Small dolls began appearing on doorsteps across my street. At first, I assumed it was a praying children, teenagers, someone trying to be clever. But each doll was odd. Handmade, stitched from burlap, eyes too bright, limbs too stiff. I picked one up. The straw inside shifted, almost as if alive. It smelled faintly of something organic, almost metallic. The seams twitched when I handled it. I laughed nervously, setting it back on the porch. But the minute I looked away, the doll was gone. The next night, more dolls appeared, each on a neighbor's doorstep, each missing something: tiny buttons, a shoe, a patch of cloth. Curiosity got the better of me. I watched. From my window, I saw shadows moving between houses, darting silently, placing the dolls. No faces, no sound. One doll was at my doorstep now. Closer inspection revealed a tiny piece of paper inside its torso. I extracted it. Written in fine, precise handwriting were my initials. My apartment number. My apartment key. I hadn't lost anything someone knew exactly what to leave. I tried ignoring it, but the dolls seemed to follow me. Every morning, a new one appeared on my porch or inside my mailbox. I hadn't touched it the night before, yet it was always there, sitting upright, waiting, eyes bright, staring as if they remembered the last time I looked away. That night, I slept poorly, every sound amplified. Floorboards creaked, wind rattled the windows, and a soft whisper followed me through the dark. We watch, we learn, we wait. I assumed it was my mind, but the dolls shifted slightly while I slept, tilting toward me. By the third night, fear had settled deep in my chest. I tried disposing of the dolls. Burned one, buried another, left a third on the street. The next morning, 3 new dolls appeared, identical, unburned, sitting on my porch, always staring, always patient. I noticed subtle details. Their eyes would track me through mirrors. Shadows formed behind them, moving just slightly out of sync. The dolls were not just objects, they were extensions of something alive, something observing, cataloging, studying my patterns. I began marking the dolls. Tiny scratches, numbers, notches. Each night, new ones appeared, and each bore the same markings untouched, perfect, as if they copied my own attempts to deface them. They learned, they mirrored, they anticipated. My own actions became predictable. The whispers grew, softer, now synchronized with my breathing. They repeated fragments of my thoughts. You are watched. You are recorded. You are ours. I couldn't ignore them. Every glance toward a window, every step, every motion, the dolls adapted. One night, I decided to confront them. I gathered every doll, stacking them in the center of my living room. I yelled, "What do you want?" Silence. Then a single doll shifted, leaning slightly, the tilt just enough to suggest awareness. And then the others followed, slowly, imperceptibly, forming a circle. I realized my apartment had become a stage. The dolls were performers, the shadows were their audience, and I was the puppet, the prey, the observer trapped in their theater. Every movement I made, they copied. Every blink, they watched. Every breath, they recorded. By Halloween night, they had multiplied beyond reason. Dozens of dolls, each perfectly aligned, forming patterns across my living room, the hallway, creeping into corners of every room. Their eyes glimmered with intelligence, awareness. And I understood. The dolls weren't here to scare me. They were here to mark me. I tried to leave. The door slammed shut behind me. Windows rattled, but stayed closed. The dolls' shadows stretched impossibly, reaching across walls, covering the ceiling. The whispers became a chorus, counting my heartbeats, my steps, my breaths. We know you. You cannot hide. You belong. Morning came, or what I assumed was morning. The dolls were gone from my apartment. The street outside was empty. But the whispers didn't stop. And when I glanced at my porch, I saw a single doll, slightly larger, with my own initials stitched across its chest. I haven't touched it. I haven't moved it. I only watch it. And I know, tonight, more will appear. Always more. Always waiting. Patient. And some part of me wonders if, by looking, I've already become one of them. Halfway dark. The harvest dolls. If dolls appear on your porch, don't touch them. Don't move them. And maybe subscribe to keep the horror box open. The black smoke in the streets. Halloween came unusually quiet. The neighborhood lights flickered intermittently, and the streets were empty earlier than usual. Then the fog rolled in a black, viscous smoke that pooled along the pavement, swallowing streetlights and muffling distant sounds. I stepped outside for a breath of cool night air. The mist slithered across the road, curling around parked cars like a living thing. It carried whispers, soft at first, just beyond hearing. I strained to listen, my pulse quickening. The whispers spoke my name. Curiosity pulled me forward. The smoke thickened, crawling toward me like tendrils of night. Every step I took seemed guided, the fog shaping around my legs, brushing against my arms. I realized it wasn't natural. This wasn't weather. It was deliberate, sentient, watching my every motion. From within the mist, vague shapes emerged. Figures humanoid but distorted, elongated, shadows with glowing eyes, drifting silently. I froze. They didn't speak aloud. Their whispers merged with the fog, repeating my fears, my secrets, as if the air itself were alive with knowledge of me. Panic rose. I turned to run. Streets twisted, unfamiliar intersections appearing where there should have been none. The fog guided me, herding me back. My own reflection flickered in shop windows. One moment human, the next shadowed, distorted, neon eyes staring back. I realized leaving wasn't allowed. I tried calling someone. My phone was dead. The mist clung to the receiver, crawling over my hands. The whispers intensified. We know where you've been. We know what you fear. You cannot leave. I dropped the phone. Its screen cracked, tiny black tendrils writhing across the glass. The shapes advanced, not fast, but inevitable. Shadows detached from their forms, slipping between objects, wrapping around walls, creeping into homes. They imitated humans who had passed through these streets earlier, only wrong. Limbs bending incorrectly, movements jerky, grinning faintly inhuman. I ducked into an alley, thinking the fog would spare me. It didn't. A tendril slid over my shoulder, leaving a cold, wet trail. My reflection in a puddle shifted independently. Neon eyes stared up from the water. I gasped, and the fog seemed to inhale my breath, responding to my fear. I saw a figure, barely human, standing under a streetlight. It mimicked my posture perfectly. Every twitch of my fingers, every blink, it copied. I spun, expecting it to be gone. It wasn't. The street behind me had doubled in length. Fog stretched endlessly. The city had become a labyrinth. From within the mist, voices whispered in chorus, growing louder, more insistent. You walked here. You see us. You are ours. Every echo carried knowledge of my life, my routines. I tried hiding behind parked cars. Shadows moved through metal, bending around corners. There was no shelter. A sudden gust cleared a small path. I ran, following it blindly, hearing footsteps behind me that weren't my own. The whispers became commands. Follow, join, breathe. Every time I paused, the fog thickened, pressing against my chest. My own heartbeat echoed unnaturally loud in the blackened streets. I stumbled across an abandoned lot. Shapes congregated, forming a circle. Eyes glowed within the smoke, staring, patient, hungry. The whispers now formed words I couldn't ignore. They knew my fears, my desires, even my thoughts. The fog wasn't just alive. It was intelligent, predatory, a collective presence feeding on terror. I tried to escape by jumping over a fence. The fog warped around it. Shadows reached from under the boards, fingers curling impossibly. I fell, scraping my hands, and when I looked up, the figures were surrounding me, barely humanoid, barely solid, but unmistakably aware. One approached, its glowing eyes fixed on me. A whisper slithered directly into my skull. Stay, watch, learn. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. My body moved, unwillingly, toward the center of the circle. The fog vibrated, pulsing with energy, mimicking my panic, amplifying it. Hours or maybe minutes passed. I couldn't tell. Time distorted. Shadows weaved together, forming shapes of past victims. People I'd recognized fleetingly in the neighborhood. They beckoned. My reflection in nearby broken windows began moving independently, mirroring the fog. I realized I wasn't alone, and leaving was impossible. I managed to break free, slipping into a dimly lit street. The fog receded slightly. I reached my door, heart hammering. I thought I'd escaped, but a glance at the street revealed thin wisps lingering, coiling around lampposts, neon eyes glinting from every shadow. They were patient, waiting, still moving. Inside my apartment, I shut every window, locked every door. But the whispers continued. From vents, under floorboards, even through my phone speaker. Faintly, you walked here. You saw us. You belong. I couldn't sleep. Every glance at a mirror or darkened corner made me jump. Halloween morning came, and the fog had vanished, or so I thought. Walking outside, I noticed faint black tendrils along the street. Neon eyes peering from alleyways. It wasn't gone. It had learned me, tracked me, and I knew it would return. Next Halloween, or the one after, or whenever the streets were quiet. Halfway dark, the black smoke in the streets. If a black fog creeps through your neighborhood, don't follow it. And maybe subscribe to keep the horror box open. The neon eyes in the fog. The fog rolled in before midnight. Neon streaks pulsed within it, strange colors that seemed alive. Orange, green, and violet shimmered across the streets, bending and twisting with a life of their own. I paused on the sidewalk, heart hammering. Something was watching. At first, I saw only shadows, shapes lurking, moving against the glow. They weren't human, but they mimicked humans, jerking and twitching in impossible ways. Neon eyes reflected from the mist, tracking my every step, calculating each movement. Panic surged, but I kept walking, trying to appear calm. The neighborhood seemed deserted. Streetlights flickered weakly, neon fog absorbing their light. I heard whispers, soft, layered, coming from all directions. They repeated fragments of my thoughts, fears I hadn't voiced. "We know you. We've seen you." The fog wasn't just atmospheric, it was sentient. I passed a broken mirror in an alley. My reflection was wrong. Neon eyes stared back, wider than mine, glowing faintly through the glass. When I blinked, it didn't. The reflection smiled when I didn't. A shiver ran down my spine, and I realized escaping wasn't a matter of running. From within the mist, figures emerged. Tall, thin, almost human, but their limbs bent at angles that shouldn't exist. They walked smoothly, fluidly, but their movements were slightly off, jerky, unnatural. Neon eyes glowed from the fog around their heads. They weren't approaching me yet, but they were tracking, testing boundaries. I tried to call for help. My phone died immediately. Static hissed from the speakers, and the whispers intensified. "You cannot leave. You are ours. You will see us." Every sound was absorbed, transformed, returned as a chorus of neon-eyed voices. I clutched my jacket tighter, wishing I had never stepped outside. The fog thickened. Shapes multiplied, forming arcs and waves, some merging into humanoid forms, others splitting into tendrils. Neon eyes flickered in patterns that hypnotized, drawing my gaze, forcing me to follow. Each blink was a countdown, each step forward an invitation to something I didn't want to see. I turned a corner and nearly collided with a figure. Its body rippled, almost liquid, neon streaks pulsing along its skin. It reached for me with elongated arms. I froze. It didn't touch me, but mimicked my posture perfectly. Every small twitch, every hesitation, it mirrored. Fear fed it, made it stronger. I ran blindly. Streets stretched unnaturally. Houses warped, doors appeared where none existed, windows too high or too low. Neon eyes glimmered in every reflection, on every corner. I passed parked cars and saw multiple versions of myself staring back from the glass. Some moved independently, some laughed softly. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, creating impossible sentences. "You walk here. You belong." I tried shouting, tried throwing things, but objects passed through the fog harmlessly, distorted, as though the mist absorbed them. My panic increased. The fog thrived on it, feeding its presence. I spotted a small alley and slipped in, thinking I could hide. The fog followed, trailing behind like liquid shadow. Neon eyes peered from every crack, every corner, some floating mirror. I tried pressing myself against the wall, hoping to blend, but one set of eyes followed, always focusing on me. Movement behind me. A figure, human in shape, but glowing neon through the mist. Its hands were elongated, fingers bending unnaturally. It mirrored my breathing, my posture, even my fear. I realized the fog created puppets extensions of itself, to track, torment, and manipulate. I couldn't escape. Hours passed, or minutes, I couldn't tell. Streets looped, patterns repeated. The fog pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Neon eyes flickered, forming strange symbols in the air. They weren't just watching. They were testing me, marking me, teaching me that the fog didn't just surround the city. It was alive, aware, and patient. I tried stepping onto a main road. Neon fog parted slightly, forming a corridor, seemingly allowing passage. I ran. Behind me, whispers followed, describing my route, predicting my steps. I glanced back. Shadows bent impossibly, creating doors, walls, and barriers I hadn't seen before. I was trapped in a living nightmare. Finally, I stumbled onto an empty plaza. Neon fog swirled above, forming arcs and loops that seemed to pulse with intelligence. Eyes blinked within the mist, glowing brighter, synchronized. The whispers formed a single chilling sentence. Now you are one of us. I froze, terror rooting me to the cracked pavement. I awoke the next morning in my apartment. Windows were intact. Street looked normal. But my reflection, my eyes glimmered faint neon. A single pulse in the mirror reminded me. I hadn't left the fog entirely. It had followed me home. And one day, the neon eyes would return to the streets, waiting. Halfway dark. The neon eyes in the fog. If neon fog rolls in your streets, don't step outside. And maybe subscribe to keep the horror box open.